Learn how to find your lost AirPods, even if they're lost in your ears. The Note 7 is back, sort of. And Elon Musk wants to connect a computer chip to your brain in order to save humanity. All that and a whole lot more coming up on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1733, recorded Monday, March 27th, 2017.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Today. This is the show where we tell you every single thing you need to know about technology that happened today. I'm Megan Maroney.
I'm Nathan Olivares-Giles, and the Wall Street's Rolf Winkler will join us later to talk about Elon Musk's latest company, which wants to help human brains keep up with AI. But first, let's dive into the news.
Before we start the news, I have to say that we got these stickers. The Burke Chat stickers.
Oh,
I have to thank Bleak I put it in a very special place. That's Burke's. So yes, Burke Chat is our friend Burke who sits in the studio and says important things and helps us out of jams. For example, when we did not know what the cosmic screwdriver was, and he helped us out to tell us Sonic screwdriver.
The Doctor Who reference, yeah.
Sonic screwdriver from Doctor Who. Thank you. So, Burke Chat, if you want to get involved, then all you have to do is communicate purely through tiny index cards with writing on them. Now, let's get to the news. Over the weekend, one of Uber's self-driving cars in Arizona was involved in a high-speed crash after a human driver failed to yield. Uber temporarily suspended its driverless testing program in Tempe, San Francisco, and Pittsburgh, but now they've started back up again. A brief investigation showed that the Uber car was in self-driving mode when the vehicles collided and caused the autonomous vehicle to roll onto its side. There were no injuries. And there was a driver and an engineer in the front seats of the Uber Volvo SUV. It is customary. And the Uber, I guess, was making a turn at the time.
Well, I'm glad that Uber, paused everything, collected all the information they needed to get, figured out whether this is their fault or not. And now it seems like that they're confident that this was not necessarily the car's error, that they're going to start things up again. I got to give them some props for pausing things and figuring that out. But it does sound like there's still a lot of work they have to do on their cars. I mean, we've been seeing reports over the last couple months that, humans have had to step in on a regular basis and take over the autonomous vehicles. So there's a long ways to go. But, it is kind of nice to hear that this might not necessarily be a result of their technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be that period of time when it's half driverless, half driver full.
Yeah.
and that's going to be an awkward transition. When there are all driverless cars, I think it will be easier. They'll be communicating with each other. But the failure to yield is an interesting one because we've heard a lot of stories about how self-driving cars will just wait. I mean, this was specifically Google's cars. They'll just wait. And then, people on bikes that are going back and forth or, the driverless car is confused and it would just wait there forever. So the fact that it just went ahead, even though another car, was about to hit it, that's an interesting. I don't know all the details, but
yeah, that's one of the promises of self-driving cars is that they will be safer and make better decisions than we're making on our own, and will be safer than human drivers, right? And if you don't have that benefit, then to a certain extent, like, what's the point? So, it would have been a lot more exciting to say, hey, our car recognized that this was going to be a potential crash. We stopped in the nick of time, or whatever, but that didn't quite happen here.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that happens all the time. I'm sure it does happen all the time. It's like we always criticize our security systems because of the times that, they don't work. But then what about all the times that they do work?
And we've got actually a little bit more Burke Chat here.
Bad impulse control. I'm guessing on the part of the driver. Because I do not know that driverless cars yet have any impulse control.
I haven't seen any reporters or journalists speak to the driver of the car that hit the Uber car. I'm sure that person probably doesn't want to talk if they did try, because they're probably talking with their insurance company and things right now. But it would be really nice to see if like just maybe that person saw the Uber car and was like, you know what, gonna take our jobs or something crazy, you know, some road rage incident.
Yeah.
You know, not to extend things too far there, but I do wonder because you can pick those things a mile away. I mean, they got the cameras all over them, a lot of stickers.
So you're saying it was a Google employee that did that?
I'm just saying someone should ask the question. These are important questions that we need answers to.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, the Trump administration is creating an Office of American Innovation that will be charged with modernizing the tech infrastructure of all federal agencies. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will be leading the office, which is expected to be formally announced next week sometime. The Washington Post, which broke the news, said that the office will run out of the White House West Wing. Kushner will report directly to President Trump and will reportedly fill his team with consultants and former tech and business executives. It's not clear just who those people will be yet, but Kushner told the Post in an interview for their scoop, the government should be run like a great American company. Our hope is that we can achieve success and efficiencies for our customers, who are the citizens. So a pretty interesting development here. What do you think about this office? Does this sound like a good idea?
It sounds like a great idea. An innovation office sounds wonderful, make bureaucracy more efficient. I am all for it. It hasn't done anything, so we can't say whether. So yeah, I think this is great. I think that there's some reason why political bureaucracy does move slow, and I don't always mind it depending on what it is that's being tried to push forward. But I do think that all the companies that he is meeting with, the tech leaders that he's meeting with, could have important suggestions on how to to run the government like they run their companies.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. So far, it sounds like some of the people who will be involved in this office are some of the folks who set up some of those meetings with like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Tim Cook, as the president has been meeting with them so far. One thing that's a bit worrisome to me here is that this office, we're not totally sure on how much authority they'll have, if the other federal agencies that they're giving advice to will or will not have to follow that guidance. But it doesn't sound like there's any other oversight for their decision-making since they're reporting directly to the president. So it would be kind of nice to see some sort of check and balance to say, okay, before we make this sweeping change across federal agencies, is this the best thing? And that's where that slowdown in the bureaucracy can maybe potentially be a good thing at times. But, a tech motto is to move fast and break things, right? So we'll see how much of Silicon Valley they bring into D.C. But one of the things that has come up, and this came up in the Post report as well, is that this might lead to some privatization of government, of federal actions and agencies right now. So kind of got to take a wait and see approach to see exactly what they do and they accomplish. But I do agree with you that it sounds like a good idea. One detail, it sounds like Steve Bannon, who is a direct advisor to the president with no outside oversight, he's just there as an advisor. He reportedly won't be involved in the Office of American Innovation at all, which is a pretty interesting detail.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that they would make that statement too.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is Jared Kushner's brother, who's Jordan or Joshua Kushner. He runs Thrive Capital. He was the founder of Oscar Health, which is a sort of, I've always thought that Katie Bennett from the New York Times did a great piece, sort of introduced me to that idea that, they're brothers. And he runs this app that is involved in getting people health care. Like it was involved in the Affordable Care Act. Like it was sort of trying to take technology and use it to make it easier for people to get health care. So it's, they've made statements saying like they're very separate, but it is always interesting to point out that there is that connection in Silicon Valley between Jared Kushner and Joshua Kushner.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's just worth knowing that Jared is going to be a pretty busy fella. He's a former real estate and media executive before joining the White House team. And of course, the president is his father-in-law, but he also currently advises on foreign and domestic policy, which is a job in and of itself. He also advises on presidential personnel decisions and serves as what the Post calls a shadow diplomat, leading advisement on relations with China, Mexico, Canada, and the Middle East. So this guy's going to have a pretty big to-do list, especially with this new office coming up that he'll be leading. Of course, with all of this, I think we have to mention concerns of nepotism as well. given that he is one in the family. But this would be a great opportunity for the White House and Jared to maybe prove some doubters wrong and show that they can come up with some good ideas and actually do some innovative things. So I'd love to see them succeed, but there's a lot of reasons to be concerned here as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, in other news about politics and technology, over the weekend, the UK's Home Secretary Amber Rudd gave an interview on the BBC that left many privacy advocates scratching their heads after reports surfaced that the assailant in last week's Westminster attack used the encrypted messaging service WhatsApp. Rudd said there should be, quote, no place for terrorists to hide. Rudd also likened private messaging to envelopes that authorities used to be able to steam open, and she hoped to pass legislation to break encryption, arguing that we should be able to get into those envelopes. But once again, those old metaphors do not seem to work on encryption because, of course, opening one envelope with steam does not automatically give us the power to steam open them all, as introducing backdoors would. So what do you think, Nate?
I think this is one of the many examples, it seems like multiple each day, of politicians who just don't understand how technology works and give oversimplified reasoning as to why they want to have these backdoors and basically eradicate privacy, which I think is sadly kind of scary. I hope that as technology becomes more ubiquitous, our understanding of it and why privacy matters so much grows in step. But in this sort of situation, I'd really like to see tech companies double down on what they've been doing so far, which is saying, no, we're not going to have backdoors. No, we're not going to do encryption and those sorts of things. In this specific instance, she's making the argument that terrorists are using WhatsApp to communicate with one another and thus make plans and all these sorts of things. But we've seen multiple examples in the past of terrorist attacks that are foiled before they're put into place, or crimes that have been committed, and law enforcement agencies being able to do what they need to do and figure out who committed those crimes and those sorts of things without ever having to worry about encryption and actually getting through. So it really, to me, it feels like there are other ways. And right now, there are other tools that intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies have at their disposal to achieve the same goals as this backdoor. Of course, the backdoor question, the reason why it's so dangerous is because once it exists, if it got into the wrong hands, or if other people found out how to access it, then it's a problem. And like you said, then suddenly all of those envelopes are opened or whatever, right? So the analogy doesn't work, and it seems like they just don't really understand the danger that this could pose. And there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the technology. But it's not a surprise, though. I mean, politicians have been making this argument for years now.
Mm-hmm. And it's not a surprise that they would use a terrorist attack to bring this up again. Of course, this is the same as the iPhone versus the FBI situation. It's like you start to scare people. Like, look at what can happen. Isn't that scary? We need to break encryption, which it's math. And so I think I'm hoping good things will come. I think that the British government is meeting with leaders of WhatsApp, of course, owned by Facebook. So meeting with some leaders of these American companies to talk about it. So maybe they can explain how it works. Also, they have reported that they used WhatsApp, but they've also reported that this terrorist might not even been connected to a larger organization, was using very low-tech methods, low-cost techniques copied from other attacks. Yeah,
It's also worth pointing out the fact that like the encryption technology that WhatsApp uses, which is also used on an app called Signal, that's it's in like an open source technology. It's public contributions come to it, so it's not necessarily as simple as like telling one company like create this backdoor for us, and it's now all things are going to be solved. Like iMessage and everything that Apple uses for encryption, they have their own brand of encryption methods and all sorts of different things. So I think there's maybe an oversimplification on that side as well. Well, get ready to update your iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch. iOS 10.3 is now available, and it introduces a new feature called Find My AirPods that sounds super useful. Also, there's a new file system called Apple File System, or APFS for short, and that file system will arguably work better with flash storage, offering faster read and write speeds and save a little bit of space in the process. iOS 10.3 also introduces some CarPlay improvements, series support for cricket scores from the Indian Premier League and International Cricket Council, and a new user security section in the Settings app, and weather data in the Weather app that you can now access using 3D Touch to give you a little forecast. So looks like there's a lot of nice little helpful features around here. Nothing too groundbreaking or crazy, but you tried out the Find My AirPods earlier today, and I use AirPods like on a daily basis, and I am always worried about losing those damn things.
Yeah, I tried it out. Of course, the AirPods were in my hand at the time when I tried it out. So it works with Bluetooth. So if you lost it somewhere else, you would have had to have been connected wherever you were. So if you just carry them around in your pocket all the time and you haven't connected, and then they fall out of your pocket, it might not work. Finding them in that way. But if you lose them in a couch cushion, or if you were running and you set them down somewhere in your house and then you're at work, you might still be able to know where they are. So it's when it disconnected. We talked about this the other day because the maps, Apple Maps also knows where your car is parked.
Yes.
And we're wondering, how does it know that? And because you said it doesn't always do that for you, but it's only when you connect to the Bluetooth.
Exactly. It uses Bluetooth to figure out where your location was. And then after you've made the disconnection, it will tell you where that car was based on where the Bluetooth location was at the last point by using the Bluetooth and your location sharing settings. But if you move the car and didn't activate the Bluetooth after that again, then it will show your car as being somewhere where it's not.
Right. So it kind of works the same way. It also works if you only lost one of them. So it works in the Find My iPhone app. So it's within that app, and it shows all of your the things that you've attached, and you can press play a sound, and then you can mute one or other. If you just lost the left one, you can mute the right one, so only the left one is playing. And also, the sound starts out very low, just in case you've lost them and you find out that they're in your ear.
Which I can see happening. I mean, you can barely feel them when they're there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I've lost sunglasses when they were on my eyes, so I get that. So yeah, I mean, some of the other stuff. There's the podcast widget. If you use the podcast app on your iPhone, I can tell you many other podcast apps that are better, but the widget does exist, and I tried to use it on my iPad and it crashed my iPad, but
not good.
I know, but then I used it on the iPhone, and it's not that great either. All it does is just play. There's no controls on it.
So it's basically like the music widget.
Yeah. Well, no, because it's like the music widget. Then you have to go under. Mm-hmm.
Well, the crash, that brings up a good question. Should people download this today, or should they wait a couple of days? Because obviously you want to stay on top of your software updates. There's always security patches there too, and you're just protecting yourself and living a safer life digitally if you stay up to date with updates. But sometimes there can be bugs and there can be crashes and concerns. So maybe, is it worth waiting a day or something? What do you think?
I guess so. I don't know. Sure. I don't think there's the same sort of of people reporting that it's bricked their iPhones, but
it does happen every once in a while.
Yes, of course. And there's been people in our chat room that said, their scanner apps don't work, and different things like that. So sure, wait a day, and I'll let you know if it's okay tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. Watch the show tomorrow, and we'll let you know if it's okay.
We'll let you know if there's any major fires.
Safe to go back in the water. We'll let you know.
Great.
The Note 7 is back, or at least part of it is back somewhere. Samsung says they will start selling refurbished Note 7s without the batteries. You might remember those. Those are the ones that sometimes caught fire. Salvaged components from the estimated 4.3 million devices will also be recycled, and the precious metals such as copper, nickel, gold, and silver will be extracted using environmentally friendly methods. This all came from a Samsung blog post. So would you buy a refurbished Note 7?
No, I would not. And I really hope no one else does either. Now, what the problem was, Samsung says, with their batteries was that there was manufacturing errors from their battery suppliers. But based on reporting that I've done in the past with colleagues at the Wall Street Journal, part of the problems was they just put batteries that were too big into the phone, and batteries can expand and especially when they're heated up and things like this. So there was inherent design issues there as well, and things that I'd like to see Samsung acknowledge a little bit more publicly and a little bit more transparently. Now, ideally, you would think that Samsung and its battery suppliers have gotten their act together, and they're maybe going to be putting smaller batteries inside of these devices, as well as things that are built better. But, I kind of feel like to a certain extent, the fact that they've burned so many folks here, if you're a big Samsung fan, hey, if you really want to go for it, go for it. But I think they need to show and prove a little bit. And we have the Samsung Galaxy S8 coming out soon. The S7 didn't have any of these issues. To be fair, this was isolated to the Note 7, but it was a worldwide problem. And I would just personally give it a little bit more time. I think Samsung will figure these things out. They're one of the leading technology companies, and they supply parts for a lot of other devices, including iPhones. So I think this is something that is fixable. But personally, I think they need to show and prove a little bit before we start giving them our consumer dollars for this specific device again.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm all for them being transparent about how they're recycling or reusing parts of it. And that's a big problem, but they're not the only ones. There are 4.3 million iPhones also. And just because they were used for a couple of years, that makes a difference. But it also, whenever you see these stats and you think about all the chemicals that are inside the devices, it makes you think a little bit about how often you upgrade.
Yeah, definitely. E-waste is a concern. I'm glad that they're doing these things. To a certain extent, this is really just all about they took a big loss and putting all these devices out into the wild, having to recall every single one of them multiple times. And I think there were 2 or 3 recalls, which is also important to know when considering buying one of these refurbed models. Rather than just recycling them, putting them back out into the wild, hopefully fixed, is a way to maybe recoup some of that cost and some of that loss. But I'd like to see them just scrap them and recycle them all.
And what about the S8 that we're going to hear about tomorrow? Do you think that's going to have problems?
I hope not, and I think not. Given that this was isolated to the Note 7 design and battery suppliers, I think that won't be necessarily a problem. But yeah, I look forward to hearing more about the S8 on Wednesday. I think it's going to be really exciting to see what they have. And, it's a fun time. It's, there's rumors of no bezels and no home screen. So I think the future looks bright for Samsung. They didn't necessarily have the massive losses financially from this and the reputation hit that I think a lot of people expected. But even in this instance, I would personally take a pause and wait and see and give it some time. I wouldn't necessarily be rushing out and buying that on day one as maybe early adopters would regularly if they're super Samsung fanboys and fangirls or whatever. So I'd just kind of take a deep breath and give it some time. But this is part of what we're here to do is to analyze these things and to test these things out and let you know how it all plays out. So we'll definitely be paying attention to this stuff. Well, Rolf Winkler joins us to talk about a scoop he got today. Elon Musk wants to connect your brain basically with computer chips to help humanity keep pace with artificial intelligence. And he founded a new startup called Neuralink to do just that. Rolf Winkler of the Wall Street Journal broke the news of Musk's latest company and what it's all up to and joins us to talk about it right now. Rolf, how far along is Musk with Neuralink and how does he envision this technology eventually working?
Hey, Nate, how you doing? It's embryonic at this stage. Neuralink is a new company to really go after what Elon has teased over the past year. He's teased something called neural lace technology, what he calls neural lace. This idea, scientists call it neural interface, but it's this idea that you could basically create an AI layer inside your brain to help it communicate more quickly, more directly with a computer.
Neuralace is such a weird name. Do you have any insight as to why he's choosing that terminology versus others?
Well, Neuralace is his formulation. I think it's a little catchier than what scientists call neural interface. Great for branding. I think, look, right now, I described roughly what the technology is, that idea of we're going to connect your brain with basically what it is you put electrodes in your brain. This is what scientists talk about today. They're already doing it, by the way. But the idea is we would kind of take very small microscopic electrodes, you get them into your brain, and then they would, who knows how the magic's going to happen, but once they get it to work, We can go into that in a little more detail, but yeah, then you'd be able to talk to your computer instead of having to tap with your thumbs, right, on your keyboard.
So essentially, it would like
output
upload and download thoughts and commands from your brain, right? I mean, basically,
in theory.
Yeah.
In theory, one day, right? So before we even get to that, what's funny about this startup is if you talk to people who have had conversations with Neuralink and with Elon, the thing that comes out is how it could be kind of similar to SpaceX and Tesla in this sense. So SpaceX we think of as the company that wants to go to Mars, right? Crazy moonshot idea. Who knows if they're going to get there? But in the meantime, they're developing technology that serves a really important market need for SpaceX's launch services. For a company like Neuralink, it is brain disease, probably, as an entry point. So, yeah, neural lace technology, as we just described it, putting a computer in your brain, that sounds totally nuts. But actually, we already do a version of that today. Parkinson's patients use something called deep brain stimulation, which is sort of a dumb neural interface, if you will, and it works for them fantastically well. The trick is, what if you could come up with better tools, more effective brain stimulation with something they call a closed loop that can basically talk to your brain back and forth. You might be able to solve intractable brain diseases like major depression, like epilepsy, like some other things. These are things that scientists today are very excited about. And that could be the first step here for Neuralink, long before they ever get to, the appliance that they add to your brain or whatever, to help you win the race with AI.
So before we started the show, I asked you if you had a computer inside your brain, and you were a bit cagey on your answer. You did not say yes, but you did not say no either.
Well, I'm just riffing off what Elon said himself, where his idea, he made a famous quote from him last year where he said, "We're cyborgs already," right? People thought that was nuts. But his point was, look, you've got your smartphone, and it's an extension of you. And a lot of what's in this phone is already you, and the way you interact with it. The trick is that the problem is, as he saw it, you just interact with it very slowly, typing away with your thumbs. Your output, in other words, is your output bandwidth, if you will, is limited, as opposed to, say, your input, your capability to take in information via your eyes. You can take in a whole bunch of information very, very, very quickly. So that's where that idea comes from. Do you already have a computer in your brain? No, physically, of course not. But we have a lot of computers around us all the time that really are extensions of ourselves.
We sort of move the stuff that was in our brain out of our brain, right? Like I don't know anyone's phone number. I don't know directions anywhere. I don't know all the things that I learned in school because I can just Google them. Is that what you're talking about?
Sure, I think that's a great point. We are outsourcing more and more information, more and more tasks to our smartphones, to our computers every day as they get more efficient. My favorite thing, I remember I once saw a tweet. Somebody took an old ad circular from the 1980s, Radio Shack, and listed all of the various electronics, a couple dozen of them that you could buy at Radio Shack, everything from an alarm clock to an AM/FM radio to whatever. And the person who tweeted the photo said, all of these 30 devices are now in your smartphone, right? The point is, these devices are getting so capable, they can do so many things for you. You're outsourcing more and more tasks to them, and it's a trend that will probably continue.
Awesome. Well, who else in Silicon Valley is up to these sorts of things? You mentioned that on the medical side, there are kind of very rudimentary versions of tooling with your brain with technology. But are there any other tech leaders or any other startups trying to solve similar problems that Musk will be essentially competing with?
Sure. There's one in particular that people have talked about called Kernel, which was founded by Brian Johnson, the founder of Braintree. He's pumping $100 million into that company to do something very, very similar, which is start off with to create a brain-computer interface, a neural interface technology, in the first instance to help cure brain disease, but then to work toward a device, an augmentation device that will, like as Elon puts it, help us win the race with AI. That's another big startup. But another reason to be excited about this space is there definitely are a lot of other smaller startups that you just get a feel for. In my reporting, I found a few people who, had stealth things behind the scenes that they didn't want to talk about, but they were about to launch. One thing that's happening, by the way, there's a DARPA program that's going to pump $60 million over 4 years into this area. And some of the scientists out there say, they think about the Grand Challenge, the DARPA Grand Challenge back in 2004, which created a Cambrian explosion of innovation when it came to self-driving car technology. There's a hope that something similar could happen here.
So obviously, Elon Musk runs Tesla and he runs SpaceX. And as you say in your article, he just did this in his spare time. Do you think that he's sort of just betting on this just in case the Model 3 doesn't ever come out?
You know what? He is certainly stretched thin. He's taking a very active role in setting up Neuralink. This is not something he's farming out. That's from the sources we speak to. And yes, I think he's definitely got a lot on his mind. Right now, SpaceX is he's spending all his time worrying about a launch this Wednesday where SpaceX is planning to make history, launching a booster that's been used before, right? They did some amazing things, bringing those boosters back to Earth and landing them. The magical videos you see, I'm sure you guys have played them for your viewers at some point. Now we're going to send one of those back up. So, yeah, the guy's got a lot on his plate. We got the Model 3, which we're trying to deliver this year. Is this something that he's also going to be able to handle? Great question. But you know what? People have bet against this guy before. Traditional automakers said he'd never deliver a popular electric car that people wanted to buy. Military industrial graybeard said he's never going to get a rocket launched in the air, and here he's stolen a very, very big chunk of their market share. So, he's going to stretch himself thin, perhaps, but it's tough to bet against him.
And if we are really living in a simulation, then you might as well come up with all of your crazy ideas, right?
Why not have fun with it?
Why not? Hey, why not? If somebody else is going to do it, why not me?
Well, let's talk about the hurdles that he has to pull this stuff off. I mean, obviously there's competition, as you talked about before, and there are some lower level things in the medical field, but what will it take to actually realize these goals other than a lot of money, right? You're going to need doctors to buy into working with these sorts of things with the company, and then you're probably going to need human people being willing to have these electrodes put into their brain. Is that right?
Well, here, I'll give the science a shot. Hopefully I don't mess it up too badly. Some of the challenges that scientists talk about when it comes to neural interface are, first off, getting an electrode, coming up with an electrode design that can be implanted in your brain that will remain stable. Right now, there's some out there tech. So I think basically getting an electrode in your brain that can continue communicating, as it were, they don't last for anything longer than a year, and generally a lot shorter period than that, is my understanding. So getting an electrode into your brain, designing one that will be stable is one challenge. Second challenge is delivering it. How are we going to actually implant these things safely in your brain? That's another challenge. Third is basically reading and decoding the signals, right? Let's say we get a whole bunch of, we figure out an electrode that'll go into your brain. We figure out how to get it in there. We've got to get enough of them in there so that we can read a lot of your thoughts. We can right now, science is sort of limited to a few hundred, basically reading the information from a few hundred neurons in your brain at a time. To decode thoughts, no one knows how many you'd have to track, but probably many orders of magnitude more than that. So there's also that. And last, you also then have to write the algorithms to interpret all that data that's coming out so that you can, first of all, interpret it, and then theoretically down the line, send information back, right? And then, of course, last, there's the problem of trying to convince people to get elective brain surgery at that point, if we do go the augmentation route, but that's way far in the future.
Awesome. Well, great scoop here, Rolf. Lots of great details. We look forward to learning more about this, pretty crazy idea as it grows. You can follow Rolf on Twitter at Rolf Winkler, and you can read his work at wsj.com/tech.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Rowan Cregan wrote in about our discussion about automation and robots taking our jobs. He says, why ask about automation when increases in the minimum wage have always done away with jobs? It used to be routine for supermarkets to hire 16-year-olds to stack boxes, bag groceries, and do non-dangerous jobs after school. Girls got to be the cashiers. If someone hung around the exit to the store looking for tips, the store manager would call the cops. The big heavy guys got jobs pumping gas at the gas station. So, yeah, there's a lot of economics involved in, the question of raising the minimum wage. And I think it's good to discuss that now in terms of robots stealing our jobs, because I do think that robots are going to take, automation is going to take a lot of our basic jobs. And then I do think that I disagree in terms of, I just think we need to raise the minimum wage for the jobs that are left. Like if we have service jobs, they're probably not going to go away so quickly. And I think that people need to be able to support their families on those kinds of jobs. So that's my political opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd love to see a conversation around what a living wage would be and how to get people there. Maybe rather than keeping people into class tiers and things like this. Now, of course, like the job for a 16-year-old versus someone who's in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s is pay would be different. You'd expect that, but to that point, you used to be able to buy a home and support a family as a school janitor or something like that. And nowadays, a lot of jobs don't even allow you to do all those sorts of things. So I'd love to see a dialogue shifted around that. But the fact of the matter is that throughout human history, right, we always have these kind of moments of progress, and someone inevitably kind of gets left behind or hurt or screwed over in the process, whether it's the invention of the internal combustion engine or the assembly line or whatever, right? So these aren't necessarily new problems for society, but finding that empathy and finding out how to be inclusive and allow people to get the new training so that they can keep up, what the new jobs are going to be in creating those and treating people fairly would be a wonderful thing to talk about, rather than just maybe like, fear and, profit mongering or something like that. So I think we're on the same page politically there.
We got one final story.
We do, and it's a fun one. IKEA introduced its own smart home lighting system on Monday called Trådfri. I believe I said that correctly, which means wireless in Swedish. It's built on the Zigbee standard, which is also used by the Philips Hue system, and it's set for a global release at the end of the month after being rolled out to select European countries late last year. IKEA is going to sell a 2-bulb and hub set for about $85. There's also a small puck that you can dim the lights with just by rotating it, thanks to some motion sensors built in. Looks pretty neat. And that sells for about $21. Extra bulbs are about $22 each. And you'll be able to control all of this with an iOS and Android app as well. There's also going to be LED light panels and cabinet lights if you want to light up a room, your bathroom, the kitchen, or garage. So it looks like a pretty full, lighting solution, if you want to call it that. I do have some worries about the Zigbee standard personally, because I own some Philips Hue lights, and it seems like every couple months they just stop working. I have to set the whole thing up over again. I'm not totally sure what that's about, but what do you think here? I mean, is the smart home ready for the mainstream? Because you can't get much more mainstream than IKEA when it comes to this sort of thing.
Yeah, I hate IKEA. I know it's a strong opinion, but I don't like it, and I think that I don't like going into an IKEA. It makes me feel nervous.
Yeah, there's always a lot of people. If you don't like crowds, IKEA is not the place to be.
Right. So I know Target has some smart home stuff as well, and I do think it's becoming more mainstream. I do think there's issues with the lights. I think Jason likes the Hue lights as well, but they seem so expensive.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
And so I'm trying to go with the switches, the smart switches. That's where I'm looking into. But yeah, I don't know. It's on my list of things to do to get the smart home, but I probably won't be getting it at IKEA. I'm totally okay with anyone else who likes IKEA. It's just my personal opinion.
Well, yeah, I guess IKEA is kind of like, it's where you go to buy your furniture, for your starter apartment, or if you're in college and you want to outfit your dorm room or whatever, right? It's not necessarily stuff that's built to last decades and decades, but it's accessible, it's affordable, which is exciting. I like seeing technology become accessible as much as possible. But the price is really, I think, probably going to be a motivating factor for a lot of folks here because, as you mentioned, things are expensive. A Philips Hue starter kit is about $110. A Belkin Wemo starter set is about $100. So they're coming in just under. I mean, obviously there are lots of things that are far cheaper at IKEA. You can get like a full utensil set for like $20. I was looking last night because I'm going to be moving soon, and might make an IKEA run. But
well, I'll tell you what I want at IKEA, because that's it. I just, it's not the stuff. The stuff is fine. It's just the going there and the putting it together. A plate is fine. You don't have to put the plates together, do you?
No.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Okay.
Well, I have an IKEA dresser and bookshelf now, but they're the sort of things that like they've already been through 2 moves, and I'm not sure they'll survive this last one. Because like every time you move them, they get a little bit more rickety, and they're not really built to be disassembled. It's like once you put it together, leave it that way. But we'll see here how this goes. IKEA has sold some tables and nightstands with wireless charging that doesn't work for iPhones because Apple doesn't have wireless charging on their phones. They've been doing that for a while, so they've been kind of embracing technology. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this succeeds. Like, where do they go next? Because one of the few smart home things that I have really enjoyed in my current apartment is a Nest learning thermostat. Really love that thing. Is it totally necessary? Maybe not, to be able to control the heat from your phone rather than just getting up off my butt and, from the couch or whatever. But it is pretty nice.
But if you're not at home, you can turn it off. Which
is pretty great.
Right.
And it kind of learns like when you're there and when you're not. So keeps the stuff cool or whatever. But yeah, I'd love to see more devices that really felt truly useful, and controlling lights with your phone just doesn't feel like a must-have item yet.
That's true. I agree. Well, TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's, I believe, 23 UTC at twit.tv/live. You can also be part of the show. All you have to do is email us at tnt@twit.tv or leave us a short voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW. You can also hit us up on Twitter. We are at Tech News Today TV.
All right. Find all the ways to subscribe to our show at twit.tv/TNT. And if you want to see us in person, please do. We love to have a live studio audience pretty much all the time. So just email tickets at twit.tv. That's that's tickets at twit.tv. And if you want to tweet me, I'm on Twitter at NateOG.
Thank you to Brian, our technical director, and our editor today. And thank you to Burke for helping out in the studio. And thanks to you for talking tech with us today. We'll see you tomorrow.